The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and leather as the roar of motorcycle engines echoed through the streets. It was one of those late summer afternoons when the world seemed to stand still, unaware that a storm was about to break loose. In the middle of that storm stood a woman named Emily Carter, a decorated combat veteran who had seen enough chaos on foreign soil to last a lifetime. But that day, chaos found her again, right here at home. Emily had been walking back from the grocery store, her service dog trotting beside her, when she heard the sharp crack of gunfire. Before her instincts even had time to process, she saw a man in a leather vest, one of the Hell's Angels, fall to the ground clutching his chest. Without thinking twice, Emily dropped her groceries and sprinted toward him. She didn't know his name, didn't care about his tattoos or the patch on his jacket. All she knew was that someone was bleeding out, and she wasn't about to let him die. As another shot rang out, Emily threw herself over him, shielding his body with hers. The next moment, she felt it, a burning pain tearing through her shoulder. The bullet was meant for him, but it had found her instead. Still, she pressed her trembling hands against his wound, her voice steady despite the agony. "Stay with me," she commanded, her military tone cutting through the chaos. "You're not dying today." Sirens wailed in the distance as she kept pressure on his wound. The shooter fled into an alley, leaving the scene scattered with blood and shattered glass. Within minutes, a sea of motorcycles surrounded the street. Men in leather vests with grim faces dismounted, their patches flashing the unmistakable red and white of the Hell's Angels. Their leader, a towering man named Duke, pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on Emily, blood-soaked, pale, but still kneeling over one of his brothers. "She saved him," one of the bikers said quietly. Duke's expression hardened, then softened. He knelt beside her, pressing his own hands over hers to help. "You're bleeding," he growled. Emily gave a faint smirk. "So is he. Focus on him." The paramedics arrived moments later, rushing both the injured biker and Emily into the ambulance. But by the time the sun set that day, word had spread across every biker bar and backroad in the state. A woman, a soldier, had taken a bullet meant for a Hell's Angel, and whoever had pulled that trigger had just declared war on the entire Brotherhood. Hours later, Emily woke up in a hospital bed, her arm bandaged, shoulder throbbing. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent light, only to find Duke standing at the foot of her bed, arms crossed, his leather cut draped over a chair. "You're a tough one," he said quietly. Emily's dry lips curved upward. "Comes with the uniform." "You didn't know him," Duke said, shaking his head. "Why'd you do it?" Emily met his eyes, calm and unwavering. "Didn't have to know him. He was going to die. That was enough." There was a silence that hung heavy in the air, one of respect. Then Duke leaned forward. "The man who shot him, he's dead meat. My brothers are already looking." Emily frowned. "You can't just—" "You saved one of ours," Duke interrupted, his voice cold and final. "That means you're one of us now, and no one hurts one of ours." By morning, every chapter of the Hell's Angels within 5 states knew the shooter's name. The man was a rival gang member, small-time, reckless, and foolish enough to start something he could never finish. 120 bikers were already out on the road, roaring across highways in formation, their engines howling like thunder. To outsiders, it looked like chaos. To them, it was justice. Back in her hospital room, Emily turned on the news and saw the headlines. Hell's Angels in statewide manhunt after female veteran shot protecting member. Reporters swarmed the streets, painting her as both a hero and a mystery. She didn't want the fame, she wanted peace. But when Duke returned later that evening, holding a small Hell's Angels pin, she understood something had shifted. "You didn't ask for this," he said, placing the pin on her bedside table. "But you earned our respect and our protection." Emily hesitated. "I don't need protection." Duke chuckled lowly. "You took a bullet for one of us. Whether you like it or not, you've got a family now." That night, the roar of bikes surrounded the hospital. 120 men stood outside, helmets off, candles lit. They weren't there to intimidate. They were there to honor her. A woman who had nothing to do with their world, but who stepped in when most would have walked away. Emily stood at the window, tears in her eyes, watching the sea of headlights glowing in the night. For the first time since the war, she didn't feel alone. A week later, the shooter's gang was dismantled. The man himself was found hiding in a rundown cabin outside town. He was handed over to the police, badly beaten but alive. Duke made sure of that. "We don't kill for revenge," he told Emily later. "We just make sure lessons are learned." When she finally left the hospital, a convoy of bikers escorted her home. Engines rumbled as neighbors peeked out from their windows, confused by the sight of the fierce Hells Angels riding alongside a small woman in jeans and a sling. Emily laughed softly, shaking her head. "You guys sure know how to make an exit." Duke smirked. "Not an exit, soldier, a beginning." From that day forward, she became a legend among them. The veteran who bled for a biker, the angel who took a bullet for a devil. She didn't belong to their world, but she earned a place in their hearts. And whenever her motorcycle roared down the open road beside theirs, every man in that pack knew the truth. She wasn't just a veteran anymore. She was a sister, a warrior, and the living proof that courage doesn't wear colors. It lives in the soul. The moment the first gunshot cracked through the afternoon air, Emily Carter didn't think, she reacted. Years of military training kicked in before her mind could even catch up. She dropped her grocery bag, spun toward the sound, and saw the chaos unfold in front of her eyes. A man in a leather vest had stumbled backward, clutching his chest as blood darkened his shirt. The insignia on his back, 2 wings and a skull, told her everything. He was a Hell's Angel, but Emily didn't care about gang names or reputations. All she saw was a human being bleeding to death. Without hesitation, she sprinted toward him, her heart pounding in her ears. The smell of burnt gunpowder filled the air, and then, another shot. The second bullet ripped through her shoulder, the force knocking her off balance, but she didn't stop. She threw herself over the fallen biker, pressing her trembling hands against his wound, shouting, "Stay with me. Don't you dare quit on me." Her voice was sharp, commanding, the same tone she had used in the desert when pulling wounded soldiers to safety. Her body screamed in pain, but her will was unbreakable. The man's breathing was shallow, his lips were pale. "Don't talk," she ordered, "just breathe." People screamed around them, some running for cover, others filming from a distance. The shooter, a scruffy man in a denim jacket, darted into an alley and vanished. Emily didn't even glance his way. She kept pressure on the wound, her blood mixing with his. Within minutes, the street filled with the thunderous roar of motorcycles. Dozens of Hell's Angels surrounded the scene, their engines still running, the ground vibrating beneath them. They didn't draw weapons or yell. They froze at the sight, this woman, a stranger, shielding one of their own with her bleeding body. Their leader, Duke, a man built like a wall, stepped forward and dropped to his knees beside her. His deep voice rumbled, "You're hit." Emily's reply was steady but strained. "So is he. Help me." Duke looked into her eyes and saw it, pure grit. No fear, no hesitation, just purpose. Together, they kept the biker alive until paramedics arrived. By the time the ambulance doors closed, the Angels had already made a silent vow. Whoever pulled that trigger wouldn't live in peace another day. That night, every biker bar, every garage, and every backroad hideout was buzzing with one message. The woman who took a bullet for a Hell's Angel was lying in the hospital, and the man who shot her was as good as gone. Emily woke up hours later under the blinding hospital lights. Her shoulder throbbed, but her first words weren't about her pain. "Is he alive?" she asked the nurse. The nurse smiled softly. "He's stable. You saved his life." Emily exhaled, relief washing over her. Moments later, the door creaked open. Duke stood there, hat in hand, his massive frame filling the doorway. He walked in slowly, his eyes studying her. "Name's Duke." He said, "You saved my brother today." Emily tried to smile. "Guess it's just what I do." Duke nodded, respect in his eyes. "You didn't know him. Most folks would have run the other way." She shrugged. "I've seen enough blood to last a lifetime. Didn't want to see more." He paused for a moment before saying quietly, "You got more courage than half the men I've met in my life." That evening, the hospital parking lot filled with bikers. Over 100 motorcycles lined up, headlights glowing like a sea of stars. They weren't there for trouble. They were there to stand guard. They brought flowers, cards, and one of their own vests patched with the words "Respect Earned." Emily looked out her window in disbelief as Duke approached her bed again. "You don't have to do this," she murmured. He smiled. "You took a bullet for a brother. Now 120 brothers have your back." Meanwhile, the angels were already out hunting. The shooter had been a member of a rival gang, reckless and jealous, trying to provoke a fight. He didn't realize he'd just declared war on the wrong people. Within 24 hours, every highway was swarming with roaring bikes. The shooter tried to run, hiding in an old cabin miles from town, but the sound of engines eventually surrounded him like thunder rolling in the night. When Duke's men found him, they didn't kill him. They handed him over to the police, battered but breathing. "We don't kill heroes' enemies," Duke said. "We just deliver justice." When Emily was finally discharged, Duke was waiting for her at the hospital doors. He handed her a black leather jacket with a small Hell's Angels emblem sewn inside. A gift. He said simply, "Your family now." Emily raised an eyebrow. "I'm not much of a biker." Duke chuckled. "You don't need to ride to be one of us. You earned that patch with blood." As they stepped outside, the sound of 120 motorcycles starting their engines filled the air. The rumble was deafening but powerful, like an army of lions roaring in unison. Every biker saluted her as she walked past. Neighbors peeked out from their homes, their jaws dropping at the sight of the famous outlaw gang escorting a small, wounded woman with a soldier's posture. Emily climbed into Duke's truck, tears silently rolling down her cheeks as she whispered, "I just did what anyone should have done." Duke looked at her and said, "No, ma'am, you did what only the brave would have done." From that day on, Emily became a legend among them. To the world, she was a veteran who risked her life for a biker. To the Hell's Angels, she was the guardian angel who bled for one of their own. And even though she never sought fame or thanks, she'd ride with them sometimes, helmet on, eyes steady, the wind whipping through her hair as she followed the pack down endless highways. The bullet left a scar, but it also built a bond stronger than steel. In the end, she didn't just save a life. She reminded the roughest men alive what honor really looked like. And when those 120 bikers rode together again, every rumbling engine carried the same message across the asphalt. Their angel wasn't just one of them. She was the soul of their brotherhood, and her courage would ride with them forever.